Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Susan Macbeth. I'm the founder and owner of Adventures by the Book, and I'd like to welcome you to our quarterly book bingo. And this one is in partnership with the Amery Area, Wisconsin Public Library. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to them. And also, they are broadcasting live in their library in Wisconsin. So I understand we have a live audience. So hello to those of you who are sitting in the library in Wisconsin. We're so glad you're here. And I wanted Emma to come on and say a few words about the Amery Area Library, but she's having technical difficulties. So I just want to say what I know about them is we have worked with them multiple times doing these partner book bingos during COVID. And it was really fun. They're so professional, so organized, so fun, and so supportive of the literary arts. And I really enjoyed working with them. And you guys out in the audience who have the benefit of that library are really lucky because they are fabulous folks and we love working with them. So, hello to all of you in Amery, Wisconsin. We have a fun afternoon planned for you. The Amery Area Library picked the theme of Let's Have an Adventurer. So we selected some authors who have adventure-themed books, which is really exciting for us. And now this is the first time this has ever happened. I told our authors already that we had 2 authors cancel for today, had family emergencies. So something is in the air today. Emma's having technical difficulties. There's some kind of, I don't know, something going on in the universe, but we're going to have fun anyway. And one of the authors did send in a recording so we can play that. For those of you who are new to Adventures by the Book, we create what we call multi-sensorial experiences with authors. So we do all kinds of custom events in Southern California where we're based, but also around the nation, around the world. We travel with authors. We've been to 5 different continents, exploring everything from Provence and Paris to Thailand, Patagonia, Germany, with authors who have written books that take place in those areas. It's really fun. We also have a series of wine and book pairings in Sonoma, California with our partner Hook and Ladder Winery. So if you're ever traveling up there or want to travel there for an event, our next event up there is with New York Times bestselling author Cara Black, and they're going to do a wine and book pairing up there. Our next in-person events in California are going to be with New York Times bestselling author Luis Alberto Urrea, and that's going to be on Saturday at the Carlsbad Library. For those of you who are virtual, we have 2 interesting events coming up. Is our semi-annual Pitch Fest, in which we invite 20 authors to rapid fire their books and tell you. So if you're in a book club, a library group, want to learn more about books that you can select for your next reading list, we always pick authors who are Adventures by the Book authors, formerly NovelNetwork, as are these authors today, which means that if you're in a book club, you can schedule all of them for book club visits. You just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com. You register completely for free if you're a book club or a library group. And then you gain access to our database of authors. You can read about the authors and their books, and their calendar is online as well. So you can schedule a book club visit right there on the spot, one-stop shopping. So I encourage you to do that for our Fall into Reading Pitch Fest on August 14th. And last but not least is we just started a Adventures by the Book book club, and there's 3 components to it. So we alternate every month. So one month we're in San Diego and we meet in person with the author, and then the next month we do a virtual event with a couple of our ambassadors, Dorothy and Simon, who are in the audience. And then the following month we do a hybrid in the Harrison, New York Public Library with our ambassador Giovanna. And that is like you guys are doing in Amery, is there's going to be a live audience with the author, who's Martha Hall Kelly, New York Times International Bestselling author, but we are also broadcasting live on Zoom, so you can join us either way. So Sara is graciously putting all the links to those events and in our chat box, so you can view those and get more information. And I hope you sign up for our email list, adventuresbythebook.com, and learn more about our events. But we're excited to get started now. And I'm starting off by screen sharing on behalf of our first author, Sara Ackerman, who wasn't able to make it due to a family emergency. She sent in a video, so I'm going to screen share. So give me just a minute to pull that up because I've got like 5 screens open I'm trying to juggle, and I'm not very tech savvy. So bear with me for just a moment. Okay, I've got one screen that I need. Now I need to screen share. Okay. Okay, I think you can all see that now. So let me get it started. And for the authors in the panel, if you could give me a thumbs up when I started to make sure that you can see and hear it. Starting now.
Hi, I'm Sara Ackerman, author of The Uncharted Flight of Olivia West. And I'm so happy you're here to take this ride with me to Hawaii in a tiny airplane in 1927. This book is so near and dear to my heart, especially because it has not one but two fearless females. So I put together a slideshow with pictures and some backstory and insider information into the story. So I have a slideshow and I'm going to share it with you now. So please bear with me. Okay, so here we go. The Uncharted Flight, Olivia West. This is one of my favorite covers of all my books. I love the art. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about that later. So this story is a dual timeline novel. And first we have 1927, Olivia West. Livy is her nickname. She's a fearless young pilot with a love of adventure. And when she learns of the dual air race, a high stakes contest to be the first to make the 2,400-mile Pacific crossing from the West Coast to Hawaii, she sets her sights on qualifying. But it soon becomes clear that only men will make the cut. In a last-ditch effort to take part, Livy manages to be picked as a navigator for one of the pilots before setting out on a harrowing journey that some will not survive. And then we have 1987, we have Wren Summers. Wren is down to her last dime when she learns she has inherited a remote piece of land on the Big Island with nothing on it but a dilapidated barn and an overgrown Macknut grove. She plans on selling it, but she's drawn in by the mysterious objects kept in the barn by her late great-uncle. Clues to a tragic piece of aviation history lost to time. Determined to find out what really happened all those years ago, Wren enlists the help of residents at a nearby retirement home to uncover Olivia's story piece by piece. What she discovers is more earth-shattering and closer to home than she could have ever imagined. So this story, how I came upon this novel idea, I was just looking through a book, an old book about Hawaii, and I came upon the dual air race, which is something that I had never heard about. And the dual air race happened in 1927, right after Charles Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic. And James Dole, who was a pineapple magnate here, put up a huge monetary prize to be the first to cross the Pacific in an airplane, and that's 2,400 miles. So the entire country became obsessed, and a couple months later, 8 planes ended up taking off on a foggy August morning from Oakland's Bay Farm Island. And the harrowing trip took over 27 hours, and sadly not all made it to Hawaii. So this story is fiction, but it's based on this race. And I have a lot of the characters in it are real characters. And then I also have some fictional characters. So Olivia is fictional. And some highlights of the story: it's vintage Hawaii. We have a mysterious inheritance. We have love and adventure. So we have actually a love story in both timelines. We have a rescue dog because I love having animals in all my books. It's a dual timeline. It's got some fascinating aviation history in it. And as some people have told me, it's unputdownable. So here we have a map. On the right, we have California. On the left is Hawaii. So these pilots and navigators had to make their way to this tiny speck of land in the middle of the Pacific. And no GPS, no nothing. And it was very complex back then to navigate. So part of the flight, you can see the dark line going through it is when they're flying in the moonlight, flying at night. And so about a third of the race, a third of those 27 plus hours in a tiny little plane. And this is some footage of the beginning of the race at Bay Farm Island. This was a very dusty airfield, dusty, rocky airfield along the marshlands, and the planes all came early to make sure they were airworthy. They could carry enough fuel. That was a big deal, adding extra fuel tanks, and practice for the race. On the day of the race, it was estimated that 100,000 people were watching from the airfield, the water, the hills all around the bay. And the entire country tuned in to the radio to hear the dole birds, as they were called, take off. It was such an exciting time in aviation history. Then we have, this is another shot of the field where the race began. You can see all the people lined up along the edges there. And everybody wanted to meet these people. They were movie stars in that time. And then, as I think I mentioned before, in the actual race, 8 planes took off. So there had originally been more registered. Tragically, some did not make it. Some crashed actually before the race, and then some didn't end up qualifying. Here's a good view of the airfield, rocky, dusty, and some of the planes that were in it. A couple of the planes were made from wood, and then the other planes there was like a wooden frame, and then they're wrapped in a fabric and painted with a lacquer called aircraft dope. And this was Aloha. This little airplane was kind of the inspiration and its pilot and navigator for my story. And Jensen and his wife lived in Hawaii, where he did air tours, and they barely scraped enough money to get an airplane together. Back then, I think they needed about 15,000 to enter to have airplane and everything that they needed. Here is a photo of Mildred Doran. So Mildred was the only female in the race, but she was a passenger. And then also pilot and navigator Bliss and Augie Pedler. The plane they flew in was named Miss Doran after her, and she was a school teacher from Flint, Michigan. They also had a Great Dane puppy named Honolulu with them. Then here we get to the other side of the race. This is on Oahu. This is Wheeler Field. You can see why they were called airfields again, just a big field of grass. And Wheeler Field you may have heard of if you know about any World War II history, if you've read it in other books. This is where a big part of our fleet of planes was decimated by the Japanese pilots. And this is also at Wheeler Field. I believe this is Aloha coming in. So the people in Hawaii also went crazy. We had people from all the islands there. We had people from the mainland flying in just to see the flyers arrived. And when they came, before they landed, they were escorted in by military aircraft. And as you can imagine, it was a sight to behold.
Okay, and I'm stopping the screen share because...
Okay, so enough about the race. Here's a little bit more about my cover.
Give me just a minute.
I've been over...
Okay, so I'm stopping the video because Sara let me know that she accidentally made it too long, and so she told me to just stop it at a convenient spot, and her time is up. So who was just speaking is Sara Ackerman, who is a Hawaiian-born best-selling author of multiple books. She sets her historical novels in the islands. Amazon chose her other book, Radar Girls, as a best book of the month, and ALA Book List gave The Codebreaker's Secret a starred review. Her new novel, as she just talked about, is The Uncharted Flight of Olivia West, an extraordinary story inspired by real events of a female aviator who defies the odds to embark on a daring air race across the Pacific. So that was Sara Ackerman, and you can check her out on her website that Sara has just typed in the chat box. And so I wanted to now start the bingo portion of the game because our video is done and we're on to the live authors. So for those of you who have never played bingo with us, you should have received a link for a virtual bingo card. We play bingo in the chat box. So Sara will be typing the clues in there. And Sara, can you give us an example of what it's going to look like? It's going to say in all caps, bingo call, like that. And then she'll give you a word that's associated with the Amery Area Library or one of our authors or their books or Adventures by the Book. And you click on that on your bingo card, and the computer generates the winners, not us. So it double checks your answers. So if you accidentally check a box and it wasn't a call, the computer will not generate it, which means if you think you had a bingo, the computer may say you actually didn't. And we rely totally on the computer, so it's unbiased when we select our winners. So because of that, we actually wait until we have 10 winners who announce themselves in the chat box. But that does not mean you are actually a winner. That's the confusing part of this event, is so just because you are you call bingo in the chat box does not mean you're a winner. If you are an official winner, we will notify you by tomorrow morning via email. So if you get a bingo, you're going to type bingo in the chat box. You're going to put your name and your email address, and then we will follow up with you if you're a winner. You do not have to have a blackout. You can have a bingo either vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. Again, you don't have to have a blackout. Each email address can only win once. So if you have multiple bingo cards or people who are sharing the card, you can only call one. And all our authors today generously donated a book that they will give out as a prize after the event. So we'll let you know. And we don't guarantee which books you win, but we try to give you a choice and try to honor one of your top 3 choices if we can. But you can't go wrong with any of the authors. I think that's all on the bingo, but if you have any other questions, you can type them in the chat box and Sarah will get to them. And she's doing dual duty today, so bear with her. She's doing a great job already. She's trying to type in all the links to all the authors as they speak, all the links where you can learn more about us on Adventures by the Book, as well as calling the bingo game. So it's a lot behind the scenes, and she's doing a great job. So we appreciate your patience. So now we're on to Donna Jones Alward, who is joining us from Nova Scotia. We're excited about that. She has enchanted readers with award-winning stories of happy endings and homecomings, and who does not need a happy ending right now in life? Her new historical fiction tales blend her love of history with characters who step beyond their biggest fears to claim the lives they desire. Her new novel, When the World Fell Silent, focuses on the 1917 Halifax explosion in Nova Scotia. 2 women must discover the fate of their families while a secret threatens to destroy all they hold dear. That definitely sounds like an adventure we want to hear about. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. This is my first virtual bingo and my first historical fiction. So if those of you who are joining us aren't familiar with my work, I've actually been published since 2006 in the romance genre, and this is actually my 68th book. But during the pandemic, an opportunity came up for me to make a genre switch. And I was really ready for a new and exciting challenge. So I've been a reader of historical fiction for a long time, always afraid to write one myself. The stories are more complex, the research is intensive, but I was facing a milestone birthday, and I won't tell you which one. And I thought, like, heck, if not now, when am I going to do it? So once I get over that fear of doing something different, I dove in, and the result, and let me say that I love writing historical fiction. Like I've got the bug now, is When the World Fell Silent. As Susan said, it's a World War I story set in Halifax, Nova Scotia in 1917, and it's releasing in just over a week. This is the cover. I was really lucky. They sent me a couple of mock-ups of the cover. It's with HarperCollins. They sent me a few mock-ups, and I liked them okay, but I wasn't quite sure. And so they sent me to the site where they get a lot of their book cover photography. And I found this image and I loved it, and so did my editor. So that ended up being the cover for the book. Most people are not familiar with the Halifax explosion, or even a lot of Canadian history. And that's the event that I chose to be the backdrop of the story. So in World War I, Halifax's harbor was very busy. It was on the eastern seaboard, troops deployed from here, but the harbor had special qualities. It was a deep water harbor. It doesn't freeze in the winter, and it empties into the Bedford Basin. And that made it ideal for convoys to gather and deploy together, using safety in numbers to cross the Atlantic. So on the morning of December 6th, 1917, a ship called the Mont Blanc entered the harbor, and it was loaded with munitions. And it was The cargo was need to know. So most people didn't know what was on board this ship. And at the same time, a relief ship, the Emo, was leaving. And they had a difference of opinion as to who had the right of way, even though, it should be very clear with regulations. And they collided, and the Mont Blanc caught fire. And of course, this created such a sensation on the waterfront. People wanted to watch and see. It was exciting. People were standing in their windows because Halifax is on a hill, so they could look out their windows and see what was going on. And then at just after 9 a.m., the ship exploded, and it leveled an entire section of the city. Nearly 2,000 people died, and several more thousand were injured, and then thousands more were left without adequate shelter. And in fact, it was the largest man-made explosion until the atom bomb. So that was surprising to me. So that's the backdrop of the story, but really the story is about the characters. I'm very character driven, and I'm a big fan of strong female characters and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So my two main characters, Nora and Charlotte, are both deeply affected by the tragedy, and I don't want to give away too much. But Nora is a military nurse and a bluebird, so the blue uniform, working at the Camp Hill Hospital, treating soldiers who have come home. And she lives with her sister Jane, whose husband is overseas, and Jane runs a small boarding house to bring in a little extra. And Nora loves living with her and with her two nieces. But her personal life is a bit of a hot mess. So when disaster strikes, she has some really tough decisions to make, and she's putting in horribly long hours tending to the wounded. And another true fact is that Camp Hill Hospital had a capacity of just under 300, and it saw around 1,400 casualties immediately following the explosion. So it certainly wasn't the only hospital in the city. So Charlotte, on the other hand, my other character, she's a war widow with a baby daughter. And they live with her husband's family in Richmond, which is the neighborhood that was mostly affected by the explosion. And it's not really a happy arrangement. They don't treat her like family. And so when she wakes after the explosion, she finds herself in a hospital bed and her daughter's missing. So both of these women need to find a way forward. And again, without giving too much away, because I don't want to give spoilers. For Nora, that means doing what's best for herself, but also, or perhaps more importantly, for her family, and maybe even leaving a few of her dreams behind. And then Charlotte is determined to find her daughter, and she has to rely on the charity of a good friend in the weeks following the tragedy. And though Nora and Charlotte are previously unknown to each other, the choices that they make and the secrets that they end up keeping set them on their own collision course with each other. And that leads to a devastating choice that's going to change everybody's lives forever. And of course, just when you think it's all going to possibly work out, the Spanish flu pandemic arrives, and things are in jeopardy again. And it was really interesting that I was writing this in 2020, 2021, when we were going through our own pandemic, and some of the similarities that over 100 years later, we're still finding the same things. And I think it's just those universal emotions that we all go through, no matter what time period you're in. So at its heart, When the World Fell Silent is a story about family and resilience and healing. And it's a home front story with a significant amount of danger in it. It's about letting go of old dreams and struggling to find new ones. And it's about the strength and fierceness of women to love and protect what's important, and no matter what the personal cost. So it's not out yet. You've got another about a week to wait. It's ebook and audio on July 19th, paperback in the US on August 1st and August 6th in Canada. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Donna. And I think Mindy summed it up. She says, I love character-driven stories and stories about women. So your book sounds right up her alley, which is wonderful. So,
I love that.
Yeah, so everybody's sending me messages at once. So I'm trying to read my text, my email, my chat box. I'm sorry if I'm trying to get to everybody. Thank you, Donna. Next up, all right, I see that Katherine just texted me that she has a hard stop. So does anybody have any problems if she goes next so we can make sure we fit her in? Katherine, are you ready to go if we invite you? Okay, great. So Katherine Howe, and my apologies to Anna, we will get to you next. But since Katherine has to leave, I want to make sure we can squeeze her in. Katherine is the author of the New York Times bestsellers, The Physic Book of Deliverance Dane, The House of Velvet and Glass, and Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty, which she co-wrote with Anderson Cooper, as well as several young adult novels. Her novel, A True Account, Hannah Mazary's, I always pronounce it wrong, Sojourn Amongst the Pirates, written by herself, is a daring first-hand account of one woman's unbelievable adventure as one of the most terrifying sea rovers of all time. And we hosted Katherine in San Diego last year. It was, I don't know if it was last year. Yeah, it seems like last year. But anyway, I mean, it's just such an adventurous,
it was this last winter, Susan.
Okay, this last winter, I don't know,
Yeah,
time goes,
yeah.
but it was such an unbelievable story. And I was so excited for her to share it then. And now I'm excited she can share it with our virtual audience as well. So welcome, Katherine.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I'm sorry that I have a hard stop. You'll probably hear some thumping in the background because I have a house full of very small kids, one of whom is mine and one of whom is visiting. And so thank you everyone for your patience with me. A True Account, Hannah Mazary's Sojourn Amongst the Pirates, written by herself. I'm somewhat infamous for really long-winded titles because my very first novel was called The Physic Book of Deliverance Dane, which is impossible to remember and even more impossible to translate. A True Account is a dual timeline historical fiction pirate adventure story. It opens in Boston in June of 1726. Day mariner who was subject to what he called hard usage. And he was he staged a mutiny. Essentially, he got some guys together and murdered the people who were in charge of them as they were cruising in the Atlantic Ocean on a ship called the Elizabeth. They renamed the ship the Fame's Revenge, and they went pirating off of Cape Hatteras. But in the age of sail, the skill set needed to make a ship go was very different from the skill set needed to know where you were going. Navigation was actually a very specific skill set at that time. And William Fly didn't have that skill set. And so he kidnapped a fisherman to try to serve as his navigator. The fisherman tricked William Fly and tricked him into sailing all the way around outside Cape Cod to Boston. And I'm in a small town just north of Boston right now. And so, because the fishermen knew that in Boston, they were really pressing hard to eliminate piracy. And sure enough, William Fly was waylaid, they were captured, they were tried. And the person who oversaw their trial and their execution was none other than Cotton Mather, the same Puritan divine who oversaw and wrote the first book about the Salem witch trials. And anyone who's encountered my fiction before probably mostly associates me with books about the Salem witch trials because the Physic Book of Deliverance Dane was a Salem witch story. So A True Account is about a girl named Hannah Mazary who has been bound out to service in a waterfront tavern in Boston in 1726 called Ship Tavern. That place also really existed. And in 1726, it was already almost 100 years old. Hannah sees William Fly hanged. And the thing that makes William Fly special is that when he was brought up on the scaffold in front of everyone, Cotton Mather and a bunch of Puritan divines tried to get him and his fellow pirates to confess all their sins and to repent. And the other guys that William Fly is on the scaffolding with all confess and they all repent. They're trying to make an example of these guys in front of all of Boston, all of early modern Boston, this maritime community. William Fly does something different. William Fly's, first of all, when he gets up on the scaffold, he takes a look at the noose. And then he says to the hangman, "Don't you know your trade?" And he unties the noose and then he ties it back better because, of course, he was a sailor. And so he was really good with knots. And then when it's William Fly's turn to say his last words, all the other guys that he's being hanged with say, they say exactly what the people in authority want them to say. They beg for forgiveness. They plead for their immortal souls. They say that they regret everything that they've done. William Fly says, "Masters of vessels, do it well by your men, lest they should do it, lest they be put upon doing it as I have done, which is to say, I'm not sorry for anything. I did everything right. And the guys who were in charge of me, it's their fault for treating me badly. This is what William Fly's last words were on the gallows. And then he's hanged. And so I imagined what it would be like for a young woman with no prospects to watch this happen. And so Hannah Missouri, my fictional character, watches this happen, and then she gets caught up in some intrigue, and she has to flee for her life in disguise as a cabin boy, and of course finds herself caught up in a piratical adventure. There's a long-standing tradition in American literature of women disguising themselves as men and going pirating, and this is my entry in that long-standing tradition. But when you're reading a true account, it's a little bit not what you expect, because for the first 40 pages or so, you think you're just following along with Hannah's adventure, and it's a kind of classic historical adventure tale. Well, about 40 pages in, we realize that actually we're reading over someone's shoulder. We're reading over the shoulder of an academic at Radcliffe named Marion Beresford in 1929, who has been brought a primary source never before seen by one of her undergrads. And the primary source is called A True Account, Hannah Missouri's Sojourn Amongst the Pirates, written by herself. And embedded in this manuscript is the hint of a treasure hunt. And so as we're following along with Hannah's story, we're also following along with Marion's story, trying to figure out if Hannah's account is really true, and also trying to figure out what happened to the treasure at the center of Hannah Missouri's story. Because of course you can't have a proper pirate story and pirate adventure without pirate treasure. And so throughout the course of the book, it is as much about questions of emotional truth versus literal truth. And of course, as someone who only writes historical fiction and who came to fiction writing as a historian, because I started writing fiction while in a doctoral program in American Studies, I'm very concerned with the question of narrative truth and how we define that and what it might mean. So the story in A True Account, Hannah Missouri's Sojourn Amongst the Pirates, written by herself, raises a lot of questions about the nature of fiction, about history, and also about what we count as true. And that is my pitch. Thank you so much for listening to it.
Wonderful. Thank you. That definitely fits the theme of our Let's Have an Adventure. So it's a juicy book, and you won't regret picking it up for sure. So next up, oh, before I mention that, I just want to mention too, I want to thank you all for your book orders. For those of you who pre-ordered books for our authors today, thank you. All of the books except for Donna's, because she mentioned they're not available yet until August 1st, but all the other books that have been ordered have been shipped out. So you should have either received them or will be receiving them very shortly. And it's not too late to order them. We keep the order link up for several days after the event, so feel free during the event, after the event, and the next day or so to go ahead and order your copy. Just go to our website, adventuresbythebook.com. Thank you, Katherine. Next up, we have Anna Bliss, who is joining us from Alameda, California. She's a debut novelist with an MA in Literature and Visual Culture from the University of Sussex, where she wrote her dissertation on women's narratives of the London Blitz during World War II. Wow. Set before and during World War II, her new novel, Bonfire Night, is a moving, intricately wrought novel which brings together a young Irish Catholic photographer and a British Jewish medical student, each discovering the price of love, art, and ambition. Sounds so juicy. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, thank you so much. This is my first book bingo, and I'm so excited to be here. I love doing book clubs, and I know some of you out there are probably thinking about some of us authors coming to your book club, and so I'm going to do a little presentation that I usually do at book clubs, and then I have some source materials to show you too. So the Battle of Cable Street is where my book opens. It was October 4th, 1936 in East London, and a late summer day, and it opens with a character named David Rabatkin. And to put yourself in his shoes, you have to imagine that you're a young person in 1936 living in England, and you already understand that there's a disaster unfolding in another country, but you think it surely couldn't happen where you live. But then you see more and more signs that it could happen where you live, and maybe it's already starting to. So that's the situation my character David Rabatkin finds himself in. Further complicating matters, he's just fallen madly in love with a woman who isn't Jewish, my heroine Kate Grifferty, who is an Irish Catholic photojournalist, fighting her own battle for a place in the male-dominated newspaper business. It's a book that's rich in little-known British and Jewish history and will give readers a completely new perspective on World War II and the forces that led to it. So, as Susan said, I lived in England and wrote my master's dissertation on British women artists and writers during World War II, but I'd never heard anything about the anti-Semitism inside the UK before the war. And it wasn't until I learned about the Battle of Cable Street that I came to understand that World War II and the Allies' stance on it could have easily gone the other way. So, as I said, on October 4th, 1936, thousands of members of the British Union of Fascists, which was funded by both Hitler and Mussolini, planned and marched a parade through Jewish East London. And at the time, East London was the biggest Jewish neighborhood in England, one of the biggest in the world. It also had immigrants from all over the world, many from Ireland, many from Africa, many from the Middle East, and they all lived together, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in disharmony. But on this day, all people of all cultures and creeds from the neighborhood banded together to successfully block this pro-Hitler parade through their neighborhood. And when I first heard about it, I wondered what would happen if someone from a Jewish family met someone from an Irish Catholic family in the heat of this huge historic protest and they fell in love. And I was wondering, when all the excitement and the unity died down, what they would be left with. So that seed of a story became Bonfire Night, which follows my characters David and Kate into and through World War II. I first heard about the Battle of Cable Street on October 4th, 2016. I was actually just driving in my car and I heard by chance a snippet on the radio of interviews with an old man who had been there. And he was talking about how all the Irish people in the neighborhood and all the Jewish people in the neighborhood came together for this greater good. And because I'm from an Irish Catholic background and my husband's from a Jewish background, the first thing that came to my mind was, I wonder if a Romeo and Juliet story could come out of that. And I started writing right away. I was 8 months pregnant with my second child at the time. But I'll tell you that I got so into it so quickly that by the time I was in the hospital when my son was born, I remember thinking, oh, like, I wonder if I could use any of this in the book. Like, I really was full in right away because the more I learned about this story, the more shocked I was, honestly, that I hadn't heard anything about the Battle of Cable Street before. This book took me 6 years to write. It was heavily researched. I did a lot of research at the Imperial War Museum in London. They actually have this incredible library of recorded interviews with lay people who lived through various conflicts throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. They have recordings that go back to, I think, the Boer War, as far back as there was recording technology. And there's tens of thousands of them. And so when I was researching this book, if I wanted to get something like, what would the voice of someone who lived in East London in the 1930s and had gone to university, what might they sound like? They have such an excellent search engine that I could actually find those interviews and use them as sort of a way to get the speech down with my characters. I also used it for, if there's any medical historians or people who are interested in the history of medicine. There's a lot of this in this book. I again, did a lot of research at the Imperial War Museum. They have phenomenal resources on medical history and war. But I also worked with a lot of doctors that I know who helped me figure out what it might have been like to be in a trauma ward in the middle of the Blitz in London. This book, it was such a passion project. It really got me through the COVID pandemic. You know, I was home with two small kids doing homeschool for one of them. And I live in a part of California where there were very bad fires, forest fires in 2020. And so there were many days that year where not only could we not go outside because of go into stores and things like that because of the pandemic. We also literally couldn't leave our houses because the air was so poisonous. There was so much smoke. Some days the sun didn't even come up, which was a horrible time, but it did really give me a new perspective on what it's like to live through a global disaster. Not that it was the same as World War II, but it just gave me a perspective I didn't have before about parenting in a time like that, and about just trying to survive it psychologically and physically. And so in a way, it's good that it took me so long to write it, because I really was able to pull in a lot of different experiences that I didn't anticipate. Bonfire Night was, according to Publishers Weekly, it comes alive. It brings alive the threats of fascism and anti-Semitism, as well as explores the messiness of love and family. The Toronto Star calls it a tender debut about the price of ambition, a female ambition. Natalie Jenner, who's one of my favorite historical fiction authors, who wrote the Jane Austen Society, said that it would be good for readers of Ian McEwan and Graham Swift. And I think that anyone who is interested in historical fiction, historical romance, and British history, Jewish history, medical history will find a lot in this book that will keep them turning the pages. But at its heart, it really is a love story. If you love stories about unrequited love, about star-crossed love, you will love this book, I hope. And I would love to come to your book club to talk about it anytime.
Thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate that. And I just want to let you all know that if you registered through Adventures by the Book for this event, we do send out a thank you event after the email to those who registered, and we have your email addresses, and we put links to all our authors so that you can support them, find out more about them, go to their websites, to follow them on social media. So make sure you do that. And I'm going to mention, before we go right to Lora, I'm going to mention Alex Segura, because he is our last author who had a family emergency and wasn't able to make it. But I did want to tell you a little bit about him, because he's a really important adventure author, and I think he's incredibly talented and someone you should definitely learn about. He is the best-selling and award-winning author of Secret Identity, which NPR described as masterful. And his Secret Identity was also listed one of the best mysteries of the year by NPR, Kirkus Book List, and many more. He also won the LA Times Book Prize in the mystery thriller category. His new novel, Aranya and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow, introduces a groundbreaking superhero in an action-packed story about unlikely friendship, perseverance, and what it means to be a hero. And we all need a good hero nowadays. So we're missing you, Alex, but I hope that everybody will pick up a copy of his book and read it, and give him a chance to really bedazzle you with an adventure story that you won't forget. And so last but not least, we're excited to introduce Lora Chilton, and I'm going to be screen sharing for her. She's going to let me know when I want to do that. But I did want to mention that for those of you in the live audience, we may have a few minutes after Laura's done that we can take questions. And I know Emma is translating those to me right now so that when Lora is done, we can ask some questions and involve our live audience in Amery, Wisconsin. So Lora Chilton is a member of the Patawomic.
That
Okay,
you can say that. I
all
can
right,
it's
Indian
really
tribe of
called the
Virginia.
Patel. Yes.
What's that?
The more correct pronunciation would be Patawomic.
Patawomic. Okay, thank you. She tells the story of her people and their unlikely survival due to the courage of three Patawomic women. As part of her research, she interviewed tribal elders, researched colonial documents, and studied the Patawomic language. Her novel 1666 is a fictional retelling of the survival of the Patawomic tribe of Virginia, told through the lives of three women. And I have been hearing rave reviews everywhere about this book. I can't wait to hear more. Lora, welcome.
Thank you. Wingapo, Oak, Natab, Natadel Winds, Kesato, Nita. Hello, fellow tribe members and friends. My name is Silverheart. These words of welcome I bring to you in the Patawomic language, which is the dialect of Algonquin. I'm so excited to be here tonight, and many thanks to Amery Public Library and Adventures by the Book for putting on Adventure Bingo. What a treat it is, whoa, wrong side. What a treat it is to share about 1666, the novel with you, my new work of historical fiction. 1666 brings to life a story that has mostly been forgotten by the world. It is based on written colonial records and the oral tradition of the Patawomic tribe of Virginia. On a summer night in July of 1666, the tribe was attacked by land-hungry colonists, and all the men were killed. The women and children were marched south from their homeland on the Potomac River and sold into slavery. That's a jet. I'm in Virginia Beach. Sold into slavery in the killing fields of Barbados. This was an adventure these women did not choose or want. And so at this point, I want to share a book trailer with you, and Susan's going to screen share it. And a little bit of header is that I've had a great adventure working with Sibylline Press to have my book published with them. And I've learned a lot. Who knew there were book trailers? We've all heard of movie trailers. Now we have book trailers. So I like this, and it's very short, but it'll give you a feel for this story.
Okay, give me just a minute to screen share.
Okay.
One. Oops. You see it?
This is still Sarah's screen share.
Hang on just a minute. So you're telling me you can't see it?
No.
Okay, hang on just a minute. Let me try again. I'm going to figure out how it's going to let me close it. All right, it's coming. Okay, let me try this again.
Thanks for waiting, everybody.
Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. All right, what are you guys seeing?
It's not the video, it's just like a white blurry screen rectangle.
Okay, give me just a minute. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to stop screen sharing and try it again.
Susan, I'm happy to keep talking if we're having technical difficulties.
Okay, well, I've got it up, so let me try it one more time.
Okay.
No, not yet.
It's up, but the sound's not with it.
No, I've got the sound on. Are you hearing it? No.
No. Oh, yes. I think it just started. It tried. Thank, thank you, Susan. And thank you everyone for your patience with it, screen sharing. I couldn't hear the music and I don't know if others could. It's a very haunting native flute that's playing as those images are shown. So as you could tell from those slides though, it's a hard story. It does have difficult subject matter, but it's a story of resilience and survival and love, specifically the love between friends and mothers and children. It was a story I wanted to read, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I learned of my Native ancestry later in my life. I was in my 40s due to a eugenics movement that took place in Virginia starting around in the 20s. And the eugenics laws were not repealed until the 1960s. And because of that, my father and many other Native people kept their heritage and their ancestries a secret. When he told me and I learned of it, that we were and we are enrolled members of the Potawatomi tribe, I just wanted to know more about these women, the women who had been sold into slavery and had returned from Barbados, thus ensuring the survival of the tribe. I wanted to know, what was their motivation? Was it revenge? Was it love? How did they continue to work in these killing sugar fields of Barbados as they dealt with their grief, the loss, the grief that came from losing their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, their sons, the loss of their freedom and their homeland? I just was constantly thinking about what their lives would have been like. And I was looking for that book. I read a quote from Toni Morrison that said, if there's a book you want to read and it hasn't been written, you must be the one to write it. And I can't say that I had a light bulb moment and I said, okay, I'm going to write that book. But it did get me thinking about their lives and researching what their lives might have looked like. Their actual names had been lost to time, but I felt that it was important to use indigenous names and to honor the Potawatomi culture and language that had been lost through the years. The two main characters are Osaway Wadapa and Tom. We call her Osaway, Golden Fawn, and Napawe Show, which her nickname is Show, which means shining moon. We do have other names, though, that are actually recorded. The early colonizers wrote about the men they saw. One of those is Chief Wahanganochi, and I'm wearing a replica of his badge of protection. And Susan, I don't know if we want to try to pull up that last slide that is just a picture, but, and I can talk as you try to pull it up because there's no sound with it. But Chief Wahanganochi was the chief of the Potawatomi in the 1660s. And King Charles II gave the 9 chiefs in Virginia these silver badges of protection so that they could be guaranteed safe passage in Virginia. Unfortunately for Chief Wahanganochi, he was killed anyway. There was a big mystery surrounding his death and no one knew what had happened. 200 years later, in the 1800s, the original badge of protection given by King Charles II was discovered in Caroline County, Virginia. It is now on display at the Potawatomi Cultural Center and Museum. There you can see it. And one thing I think that's fun about the badge of protection is the English had spelled Potawatomi wrong. And instead of redoing the whole thing, they put a little notation and added the E in there. I think that's just so interesting. Other badges that have been recovered are in the Smithsonian. This one is on loan from the Smithsonian in the Potawatomi Museum and Cultural Center. I'm still astounded today at the words of the General Counsel, but they felt so justified and so sure of their actions that they wrote down that they were going to make war to the utter destruction of the tribe and dispose of the women in goods. Horrifying words. But I'm also in awe of the women who survived this kind of horror and their resilience and strength and the fortitude they showed to find a way to get back, an adventure of their own, to escape slavery and find a way back to Virginia. And so that was some adventure. But I do hope you'll read 1666. I've had a lot of positive feedback. Kirkus gave it a buy it review, and it's been well received thus far. And it's an imagined story based on written records and the oral tradition of the Potawatomi tribe. Thanks for having me tonight, Susan, and Amery Library.
Thank you, Lora. So fascinating. I mean, Simon said he started the book today, and right away you're transported into a world of bravery, resilience, but also immersed into the tribal clan. The author so far has definitely done her immense research, but also her authenticity shines through. Can't wait to continue this adventure. So thanks, Simon, for that, for sharing that. And I see that we have a couple bingo calls coming in. So I asked Sara to speed up the calls a little bit because for some reason, the bingos are coming slower today. And you do have to be present at the end to win. We don't want you to leave ahead of time because we want to be fair to all our authors. So we thought we would open it up since this is unusual and we have a live audience in Amery, Wisconsin. We thought we'd open it up to a few questions from them before we close out for the evening. So let me just scroll up and find those questions really quickly. Okay. So from Haley, what advice would you authors give aspiring writers who don't know where to start? So I'm going to ask maybe 2 of you to answer that and 2 of you to answer her other question. How do you juggle life and writing without becoming overwhelmed? So maybe Lora, since you're already up on the screen, maybe you can pick one of those questions. What advice would you give to aspiring writers, or how do you juggle life and writing without becoming overwhelmed?
Well, I would say the way to get started is to actually just get started and just write something. And it may not be, the first sentence may not be the first sentence that you ultimately have as your first sentence, but I do think you have to get something down on paper or computer. And that's the best way to get started. So just take the idea in your head and put something on paper. And none of it is precious. It can all be changed. And I'm sure the other authors would agree. And that's something hard to learn at the very beginning. That first sentence is not precious. It'll change, it'll grow, it'll morph. But to get there, you just have to sit down and write something. And even if it's the worst thing in the world, write something.
Thank you for that answer. And I just realized we have 3 questions and 3 authors, so maybe we'll just do one for each of you. And since Anna, you mentioned you had 2 small children, how do you juggle life and writing without becoming overwhelmed?
Well, I think the main advice I have is don't picture that as a writer you'll be sitting down for 8 hours a day and writing. I had a friend recently tell me she works for a big tech company in San Francisco, and she was like, at the end of the year, I might quit my job and become a full-time writer. And I thought, I don't know that is what I would recommend. I actually think that if you have other things going on, it takes the pressure off. And to echo what Lora said, I think the worst thing you can do is be too precious about it. As she said, like I started out write on scraps of paper. Don't buy a new laptop or get a beautiful leather-bound notebook. Just take the time you have. Honestly, 5 minutes a day. It doesn't. I wouldn't worry about blocking out 4 hours of your schedule. Just little bits here and there. And I had a writing teacher once said, if you show up for the voices, they'll show up for you. And I really like that. And if you write down a little here and there, literally like 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, half an hour here, half an hour there, the creative inspiration, the characters, the story will start to show up more and more. So that would be my main advice. Don't feel that you need to set aside hours and hours a day. It might even be counterproductive to do that.
That's great advice. Thank you, Anna. And I see we have a ton of bingo calls that came in, so I think our bingo game is officially concluded. Again, there's way more than 6 of you who called bingo, so you're not all going to be winners. We will notify you by tomorrow morning via email. If you don't get an email from us, that means you weren't a winner this time, but come back and play again and increase your odds. We loved having you here. So one last question for Donna. And this comes in, and it's a good question for you, is aside from historical accuracy, what other kind of facts do you research while writing your books, and how do you do your research? That's a good question for you because you had a very complicated book to write.
Yeah. Really for this book, it's all historical. So most of my research, 99% of my research was historical research. I hit a lot of different sources. So I expanded my book budget, and I bought a lot of research books. I'm lucky that my setting is local. So I hit my local library for some things that are not allowed to be checked out, and the librarians were great to help me with that. We also have a really great exhibit at one of our museums here in town on the explosion. So I made several visits to the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. And then for little things, I tend to do, I Google like everybody else. And so I would look at some different sites for some little things, especially military things. And then I found a really great site, and it's so easy to go down a rabbit hole, but newspapers.com. You can go in and you can put your area, your time frame, and even a search term that you're looking for, and it'll bring up newspapers from that city or place. And they're so fascinating. So I had to really, pull myself back from getting too involved in those. But like even things like what kind of ads they had in 1917 and that kind of thing. So I kind of take a varied approach to it, where I do some stuff in person, some stuff online, and then a lot of research books because I can.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Donna. And so I think that concludes our evening of adventure. I want to say a special thanks to the Amery Area, Wisconsin Public Library for being our partner on this event. They were fantastic as always. Emma, thank you for all your work on the other side, for Heather and Trevor as well. We appreciate all your efforts and all the work you do to support readers everywhere through your public library. Thanks to those of you who attended in person in Amery, Wisconsin. We loved having you, even though we couldn't see your beautiful faces. We're glad you were there with us. Don't forget that you can still purchase the author's books on our website, adventuresbythebook.com. We will ship them to you. If we have a signed book plate, we'll include that. We'll ship out Donna's books on August 1st after they are released. I want to thank everybody who came in virtually to join us, our adventurers, as we affectionately call them, our Adventures by the Book ambassadors, to Sara for doing all the work behind the scenes to run the bingo game and all the links and juggling everything, and to our authors, and including Sara and Alex, who we missed, Lora, Anna, and Donna, and then of course Katherine, who had to leave early. We're grateful to you for the books you write, for everything you do to make it interesting for readers to have good selections, and also for appearing here tonight. The way you can honor and support them is to follow them on social media, to purchase their books, to check them out from the Amery Area Library. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and here's to your next adventure. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody.